Good morning, everyone. My name is Bobani Sepoya. I'm the Built Environment Heritage Officer at SARA, the South African Heritage Resource Agency. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar, and thank you very much for taking the time. It's been a great pleasure having you, and we can see that some people are still getting on. Firstly, what we'd like to do is a bit of housekeeping. Could everyone please switch off their mics? Please make sure all your mics are switched off. And then also, in terms of questions, with each speaker that's going to be speaking this morning, if you could please type them in the chat session on the right-hand side of your Teams block. Or if you can, somehow just basically give us a message on the chat line. Thank you very much. Today's session, and also, the other thing that we'd like you to do is also switch off your video because it causes a lag in our feed, please. Thank you. I'll give you a second to do that. I think Anthony is still on. Thank you very much. I think you're still on. You just have to switch off the camera of Teams. Okay, now to everyone else. Firstly, I'd like to hand over to our CEO, Advocate Lungiso Malgas, to give us a welcome for this morning's proceedings. Thank you.
The South African Heritage Resources Agency welcomes you to our Heritage Week celebrations for 2021. We are excited to engage with all our partner institutions and the heritage community of South Africa. SARA is currently in pursuit of advancing the management of significant heritage resources in South Africa. As the national regulatory body for heritage resources management, SARA is interested in the further integration of its national management framework and is actively seeking partners that can assist in advancing our strategic objectives. As the world continues to battle against COVID-19, the year 2021 has prompted a global rethink, not only on how to manage our daily lives, but also how to manage those heritage resources that we are mandated to protect. This has presented SARA with an opportunity to extend the invitation to other role players and interested parties to contribute on how this advancement in heritage conservation should unfold. The Heritage Week webinar series is a platform that will highlight the areas of mutual interest between SARA and our heritage community. We intend on expanding our strategic network by addressing needs in heritage management, as well as the continuous building of skills for the heritage sector in an extremely dynamic world. The key purpose of the webinar is to provide clarity in our areas of conservation management and to explore potential areas of mutual collaboration between SARA and our heritage community. Most importantly, the webinar is an opportunity for us to reconnect with all those who share our passion for heritage after a very difficult pandemic and lockdown. I thank you and welcome to our webinar.
Welcome back, everyone. On that short note, basically what we'd like to do is basically walk you through the program. The next speaker is Palmyra De Almeida. She is an urban planner and has been with SARA for approximately 3 years. Her main focus has been in looking at landscapes and cultural landscapes as well as the built environment. What we focus on is both small scale as well as large scale developments as well as sites. And also we adjudicate plans and permitting. And I'd like to hand over at this time to Palmyra De Almeida. Thank you.
I'm going to share. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to share my presentation with you guys. So just give me a moment. So today I'm going to briefly take you through the built environment's new permitting policy on national heritage sites. This policy is currently out for review externally and internally, and the commenting period will end on the 10th of October. So please feel free to post comments, recommendations, questions in the chat box or send an email. With that being said, let me get into the presentation. I do apologize in advance. I do have a lot of diagrams, but don't worry, my colleagues will have all the beautiful photos for you in the next presentations. So here's an overview of the presentation. I'm going to briefly take you through the policy objective and aim, the scope of the policy, the broad legislative framework and requirements, the permit application procedures, permit guidelines for altering formally protected sites, the reproduction of national heritage resources, the procedure for consultation for protected areas, applications that SARA does not permit, transgressions, site report submissions, monitoring the appeal process, and a flow chart illustrating the permitting process. Okay. So with regards to the policy objective, the policy document is meant to act as a framework and a foundation that is meant to ultimately inform public as well as internal processes and procedures to ensure the management, protection, alteration, and conservation of the built environment national heritage sites, and that it's done in accordance to the NARA, so the National Heritage Resources Act. This is done through the permitting system that is legally mandated by Section 48 of the NARA. Through the permitting system, we are able to keep up to date with all activities that affect built environment national heritage resources to appropriately inform the development and the conservation of these sites. We are hopeful that the permitting policy will help the relevant stakeholders to better understand the permitting processes, which are in place to foster transparency, promote best practice, and proper standards with regards to workmanship, and avoid loss of heritage significance. So the scope of the policy focused broadly on the following permitting areas. Section 2718, which deals with the destruction, damage, alteration, and subdivision of national heritage resources. Section 29, which allows SARA to provisionally protect a site that is deemed to have national significance or is under threat. Sites that are provisionally protected by SARA are then permitted by SARA, and usually this provisional protection lasts for about 2 years. This policy also deals with permitting processes that are required for the reproduction of national heritage sites for profit, which is often the mass production of memorabilia for profit. The policy further touches on the standards and the principles for the level of workmanship required for permit applications to be deemed successful, and along with the process of monitoring work done, which is often done through site reports and site visits. Okay. Next. This section just breaks down broadly the legislative framework within which the policy sits. SARA is part of a 3-tier government system and is the national administrative authority for all national heritage resources and grade 1 resources. SARA only permits provincial sites if the PRA is not competent and doesn't have the capacity to process permits. SARA also comments on permits being processed by PRAS only when necessary. In addition, there is complementary legislation that applicants and professionals should familiarize themselves with. I just wanted to highlight that the NEMA and the SPLUMA have similar intent to a degree. These pieces of legislation have influenced the development of the current permitting policy in order to promote responsible, sensitive development and conservation. It's important to note that that a SARA permit does not negate complying with other relevant legislation such as the National Environment Management Act, the NEMA, the National Environment Management Act of Protected Areas Act, and the World Heritage Convention Act and building regulations. Okay. So in this section, I'm just going to touch on basically section 48.1, which allows SARA and the built environment unit to prescribe how applications are made and what deems them complete as well as appropriate. The process of built environment application goes as follows. First, the case application must be completed and submitted on SARAS, which is an online platform and tool that enables efficient coordination and management of South Africa's heritage. Applications must contain relevant, up-to-date information. It is recommended and encouraged to set up an appointment with the unit to discuss the regulations and requirements. Second, the application must include information such as details of the actions for which the application is being made in accordance with SARA's guidelines, motivation for actions including supporting document and research, digital copy of all drawings and building plans, conservation management plan or a heritage agreement if one is present, and you'll be able to get more comprehensive list of the BU permitting processes in the actual document once it goes through its final approval and is made available publicly. Thirdly, a permit will only be issued once it meets the conditions set out in the guidelines, regulations, and policy, as well as if the applicant or principal agent is qualified to carry out the work proposed or supervise the work proposed. An application fee may be applicable. And lastly, the BU may consult with industry experts with regards to the case application to come up with appropriate conditions, as well as better understand the impact of the work, the proposed works. Okay. So this section deals with implications of subdividing and destruction of formerly protected areas. So subdivided portions of a formerly protected area will still remain protected, and any alteration will require a permit from the relevant heritage authority. And the application to destroy, damage any formerly protected area is a contentious issue and requires the heritage officer to consult with the council in order to come up with the most appropriate way forward. Okay. With regards to the reproduction of national heritage sites or resources, in other words, the manufacturing of products to replicate the national heritage resources for mass production and profit, you will have to comply with section 2723 of the NARA. This broadly implies that any 2D, 3D image for sale, lease, advertising, promoting, or any other economic activity using manufactured replica of the national heritage resource, a permit will have to be issued for such activities. Okay. This diagram breaks down the process an applicant has to undergo to apply to damage, disfigure, alter, subdivide, and develop the heritage resource. Firstly, an applicant must consult with SARA as early as possible, approximately 60 days before starting the proposed work. Relevant information must be submitted, which is available in the permitting policy. SARA must assess the proposal and is allowed to consult experts with regards to this, and SARA then must make a final comment and recommendations within 40 days of receiving the application. Applications which SARA does not permit. We do not permit good scientific standards, land in the vicinity of a formerly protected heritage site, approvals in terms of section 38, properties within heritage areas, comments on planning initiatives. However, as SARA, we are able to write a letter of no objection, citing the relevant clauses of the NARA. Transgressions. So it's inevitable that SARA will encounter. So it's inevitable that SARA will encounter transgressions or contraventions to the Act. For SARA, it's important to find an amicable solution where it is possible. First, the person transgressing the Act must be informed by the principal investigator, which is usually from our HPU unit, so our Heritage Protection Unit, and what they've done wrong and the legal implications of such a contravention. Second, it's important that attempts be made to convince the custodian of the site to fix the transgression to avoid prosecution. If a heritage agreement exists, then it's important for the principal investigator to use the document to inform how to handle the matter. With regards to minor transgressions, SARA may choose to condone these. However, an official letter acknowledging the transgressions needs to be made to the relevant person in SARA, and in severe cases, the matter will be escalated to the CEO. The submission of site reports is an important part of conservation, record keeping, and is a fulfillment of Section 1312B of the NARA. For all permits issued, it is mandated that site reports must be submitted by the applicant, principal agents, with accurate record of the work done. This must be done in accordance to principles listed in the permitting policy. And I just thought I would break up the presentation with a nice picture of my manager and I on a site visit. So with regards to monitoring, SARA may monitor a site, work done, work in progress by having a heritage officer inspect the site at any reasonable time. Heritage officers after an inspection are allowed to deny a permit application or cancel an existing permit or refuse to renew a permit on grounds of conditions not being met or the applicant being unqualified to carry out proposed works or approved work. The permit holder is responsible for supervising the work, submitting the relevant site reports, as also known as closing reports, and must do so no later than 12 months after the completion. With regards to ongoing projects, a detailed annual site report must be submitted yearly. Okay, the appeals procedures. Appeals procedure when an applicant is dissatisfied with a case decision has to follow these steps. The applicant then becomes an appellant and can appeal the decision taken by bringing it to council's attention. If they're dissatisfied with the council's decision, the appellant can appeal the matter with the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. The appellant must do so within 14 days of the record of decision, and the appeal will be heard within the next 20 working days. Okay, here's just a flow chart that summarizes the guidelines for processing of permits for National Built Environment Heritage Resources. This flow chart is meant to simplify and clarify the application and permitting process. If you're going to alter, destroy, demolish, subdivide, change the planning status of a heritage site, structure, building, or implement signage or do research, it is necessary that you apply for a permit. But before doing so, it's important to know whether the heritage resource is national, provincial, or what grading it has, or if it's provisionally protected, or just protected by virtue of age, which is 60 years and older. If the applicant is unsure, that it is recommended that the applicant consult with SARA's Built Environment Unit. If the site is a Built Environment National Heritage Site or graded grade 1, then the applicant must complete a case application on SARA's, following the SARA guidelines and attaching the relevant documentation. If the application is compliant, it will take about a maximum of 60 days to process the application. If the permit application meets the requirement and is deemed successful, then it will be approved and a record of decision will be emailed to the applicant. But if not, if the application is not successful, then the applicant will be informed that their application is not successful and they can appeal the decision. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that this presentation was useful. If you have any questions, please make sure to write them in the chat box or later voice them during the Q&A. Thank you very much for engaging with this presentation.
Thank you, Palmyra. Basically, this presentation also will be uploaded onto our website after the proceedings have concluded. Next, we are having Kululeko Ntanzi, who will be presenting best practices. The presentation will cover the scope of work that we do as SARA in order to catch both heritage practitioners, stakeholders, and also the general public in the types of work that we are engaged in as SARA. And on this note, I'd like to welcome Kululeko Ntanzi. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. Thanks to and
just to give you an overview of the contents of our presentation, firstly, we'll start with the best practices with relation to compliance to the National Heritage Resources Act, followed by the best practice in relation to the National Heritage Resources Act, Section 2718, which is in line with the permit application process. Further to that, I'd like to also go over the best practice in terms of the National Heritage Resources Act, Section 38, which deals with heritage impact assessments. And then followed to that is the best practice with relation to site management, National Heritage Site Management. And then lastly, I'd like to speak on best practice with relation to community engagement, as well as public participation. Okay, so with relation to the best practice regarding compliance, we feel that what constitutes compliance applications with relation to the National Heritage Resources Act, Section 2718, a compliance permit application is one that is submitted on our online platform SARAS, with all of the required documentation attached to the application as stated by the Built Environment Unit policy guidelines, and also as requested by the case officer. We must note here that the case officer is at liberty to request any further information that they feel that is appropriate in assessing the permit application. Moving on, the National Heritage Resources Act, Section 38, compliance impact assessment application. We feel that a compliance Section 38 application, as it relates to the built environment, is one that follows the prescripts of Section 38 in its entirety of the National Heritage Resources Act, and the information provided in the reports should be in line with the impact assessment guidelines stipulated by Section 38.3 in the National Heritage Resources Act. Below this text, we see an image of the Union buildings taken from the gardens, which is a public space. To that, we have an image of the Union buildings, police memorials. We also have an image showing the Nelson Mandela statue. We feel that the Union buildings is an exemplary demonstration of a government-owned and managed building. The process of development always involves the inclusion of SARA's inputs as well as consultation at the earliest stages of development of their proposals. This type of developmental integration, SARA encourages even with privately owned and managed national heritage sites. The same sentiment is encouraged throughout all of the national heritage sites. Moving on, we have the National Heritage Best Practice with relation to National Heritage Resources Act Section 2718, which speaks to the permit application process. Now, we also have a flow diagram extracted from the Built Environment Unit's policy guidelines, and we feel that following this process is best practice in order to get permit applications through. Firstly, we have a box saying the case application must be completed and submitted on our online platform, SARAS, following the guidelines with relevant information outlined in the BEU policy. Consultation with the Built Environment Units is always recommended at the earliest stages of the proposal or the development. The case application must include written description, construction and elevation drawings, digital copy of all drawings and all photographs. Again, here we give the case officer the liberty to kind of also request any other information that they feel might be necessary in assessing the application further to the required information listed here. And then moving on, permits for work on national heritage sites will only be issued if guidelines are met and qualified individuals is to take on the work. And it's in alignment with the National Heritage Resources Act. We move on to say an application fee may be requested but cannot exceed 1% of the cost of actions for which the application is made. And then lastly, the Built Environment Unit may, in its discretion, refer an applicant to experts in the field applicable to the permit application to advise and recommend conditions if need be. Here we have Constitution Hill. We feel that Constitution Hill provides an exemplary example of how they undertake their Section 2718 permit applications. Below the aerial photo of the entire Constitution Hill precinct, we have a image, a conceptual plan, as well as a general plan of a Section 2718 permits application that was made for a Catch music studio, where the applicants had adhered to the National Heritage Resources Act by inserting interior cage insertions that are fully removable, and then attaching everything else onto the interior cage insertions, thereby not harming the heritage significance or the facade of the actual heritage. So on the left, we have an image of the studio that is already fully done, where you can see on the floor, the case officer had recommended that, had advised that the permits applicants should expose the original flooring. And then we have a conceptual plan where we have a description by the permit applicants of how they intended to go about the process of development, where we see there the passage and rooms where no physical intervention would take place, that only just fit their furniture, which is fully removable. And then below that, we have their office, where no physical, intervention was to be implemented, only furniture would be moved in. And then below that, we had the applicants proposing a green room where an interior cage would be inserted, and then everything else, all the other fittings would be fitted onto the interior cage. Below that, we have a control room, recording studio, as well as a kitchenette and toilets where also interior cages would be inserted, and then all further fittings would be fitted onto the interior cage. There's also storage, a storage space where no physical intervention would take place, only furniture and other things would be stored there. And then lastly, if you look to your right, we have a conceptual plan which basically just outlines where the actual building is, where the studio would be developed. The third slide, we speak about the best practice in relation to the National Heritage Resources Act Section 38 Heritage Impact Assessment process. Here we have a summary of Section 38. But if anyone is interested in comprehensively reading Section 38, we encourage that they refer to the National Heritage Resources Act to read it in its entirety. But to go further, Section 38 stipulates that subject to provisions of subsections 7, 8, and 9, any person who intends to undertake a development categorized as a construction of a road, wall, power line, pipeline, canal, or other linear development or barrier exceeding 300 meters in length, construction of a bridge or similar structure exceeding 50 meters, the rezoning of a site exceeding 10,000 square meters in extent, or any other category of development provided for in regulations by SARA or a provincial heritage resources authority, must notify the heritage authority at very early stages of initiating such a development. Also, the Responsible Heritage Resources Authority must, within 14 days of receipt of the notification of intent to develop, notify the applicants to submit an impact assessment and impact assessment report, and such report must be compiled at the cost of the applicant. Now, if we look at Section 38, there's a Section 38.3 which has guidelines of how to compile or draft a report, heritage impact report. And then the Responsible Heritage Authority must specify the information to be provided in the report and considered in a timeous manner. And then here we have Robben Island, which is not just a National Heritage Site, but is also a World Heritage Site. We bring this to your attention to kind of show an exemplary example of a Section 38 application that took place at Robben Island. This application was a permit application, but then further triggered Section 38 due to the nature of the development or activity that changed the character of Robben Island. A notification of intent to develop was submitted to SARA, of which a response by the case officer assigned to the case was drafted by SARA, advising on the process to be followed and the need for a heritage impact assessment. If we look at the top left, we have a general plan, and then to the right of that, we have a general plan and a locality plan. And then to the right of that, we have a plan that exposes how they wanted to put the solar panels. And then below that, we have images of the process when it was implemented, where we see the solar panels being built. And then finally, to the right, far right at the bottom, we have an image of the solar panels in its completion. We move on to the best practice with relation to site management. Now here, we always encourage and try push sites to have a heritage conservation management plan. This is because a national heritage site with an active CMP is considered to be operating at its optimal capacity, as the CMP becomes the National Heritage Sites Manual, encompassing the site's development guidelines, scheduled annual maintenance interventions, amongst other pertinent information. We must stress here that scheduled annual maintenance interventions is a way of not going to SARA for permits on a yearly basis and allowing SARA to know that every year there will be scheduled interventions. Further to that, we have a heritage agreement, which usually stands in place of a heritage conservation management plan in the absence of a CMP. So a heritage agreement is an agreement between the various stakeholders that are involved when it comes to the day-to-day management of the national heritage site. It outlines the stakeholders' roles and responsibilities in terms of management and future development. And then lastly, we have heritage consultants or specialists. It is both strongly recommended and mandated by the National Heritage Resources Act that national heritage sites enlist the services of a heritage consultant or a specialist when undertaking major developments that may impact the heritage significance of a national heritage site. Here we have Here we have the Hector Peterson Museum, which we feel is another government-owned and managed heritage site where it's exemplary in its site management. We have images of the square, and then further to that, we have interior images of the museum. A museum located in Soweto, Johannesburg, that adheres to the best site management processes as stipulated above. And it is evident by the site's appealing good standing appearance. Then lastly, I'd like to speak about public participation and community engagement best practices. Here we wanted to include the Gandhi House in Durban, Phoenix Settlement, Bambai, as well as Ohlange Institute. We feel that public participation and community engagement is of high priority in order to gain community buy-in, as well as to create a platform for interaction between the national heritage sites as well as the community. National heritage sites, national heritage resources belong to the nation. Therefore, the public should be at the forefront of engagements and contributions for the protection and conservation of the national estate. Below that, we have an image of the former newspaper house, which now operates as a computer training facility for the surrounding community's youth and the eThekwini municipality's remote office for economic development. There was also a Gandhi House, a Gandhi House museum, as well as the original Gandhi House in South Africa. To the right-hand side, we have the Ohlange Hall, where our former president Nelson Mandela had cast his first votes in 1994. Moving on to this, Ohlange Institute is where we conducted a public meeting in preparation for declaration, where we wanted to get our community buy-in from the surrounding community and allow the community to kind of take lead in the process and kind of advise where those areas of special significance are and where they feel the areas of significance should be protected and conserved. And then below that, we have the original house of Gandhi, where he resided when he resided in South Africa. And then we also have a statue on the right-hand side, which just displays his importance to the community as well as their relationship and interaction. We have reached the end of the Built Environment Unit's best practice presentation, and I thank everyone for making the time to listen and engage with Sarah on management and conservation of the national estate. And I'd also like to encourage that if there are any questions, please post them in the message box or note them down and ask us at the end of the presentation where we have our Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ngululeko. Basically, to catch some people who have just joined us, we've had two presentations. One was from Palmyra on the policy of the built environment around permitting, and the second one was from Ngululeko Ntanzi about best practices and in terms of showing both the scope of work that we're involved in, both in the province, Western Province, as well as the whole country and abroad. What we'd like to then get to is the detail, and this will be both presented by the Built Environment Manager, Ben Masinga, in looking towards Section 28, which is how we actually do the practical work that we do around preservation, conservation, and our mandate as SARA Built Environment Unit. And then after that, we'll have our collaborator and also expert who comes from around the corner from us, from an institution of the CPUT, Cape Institute of Technology, Cape Town University of Technology, Dr. Pallav Kumar. But at this time, I'd like to hand over to Mr. Ben Mosinga. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Mosinga, and I am the manager of the Built Environment Unit at SARA. As my previous speakers was, Nkululeko, but I will attempt, if it doesn't work out, I'll just turn the video off, and I guess we'll just carry on with the presentation itself. So as my colleague has stated, I'll be presenting section 28. So I would call it a rather somewhat conceptual presentation, which attempts to answer a critical question around site management in South Africa. So before I begin, let me just turn the video off, as I can see it's causing a bit of a lag, and I'll begin with my presentation. All right, as my colleague stated, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to my previous two colleagues for their very fantastic presentations. I'll be looking at section 28, which speaks to protected areas in South Africa. Now, the reason why I'm looking at this specific presentation, or rather section 28, is because SARA has never really interacted with this with this section of the legislation. I think that it has the potential to assist us with some very challenging sites. And most importantly, as you'll see, we've been receiving a lot of nominations of what I would call urban cultural landscapes that might not necessarily fit neatly into the definition of a site as is defined in the NARA. So let's begin by looking at the contents today. I'll be looking at the difference between a site versus a place as defined in the Act. I'll be looking at the nominated cultural landscapes that SARA has graded or has simply received a nomination of. I'll be looking at what section 28 itself states. I'll be looking at protected areas under NEMA, which I think provide us with a bit of a precedent as to how to go about developing regulations for these areas should we ever get to that point. And lastly, I'd like to look at how the City of Cape Town's HPOZ was an attempt to enact this protected area regulation from the section 28, even though the Act does speak specifically to HPOZ. This was a little bit ambiguous, and I think I'll highlight as to why it became ambiguous. So I think let me begin with my presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. Now, according to the NARA, we define a site as an area of land, including land covered by water and including any structures or objects thereon in, all right? And this works neatly when we declare sites under section 27 as national heritage sites. So under section 27, we will identify, grade, and declare. And normally what you find is that these sites are a demarcated space, maybe one or more urban, but they don't have multiple owners, and you can neatly package them into a single, I'd say, definition in a gazette. And then we have what I would call, or what the Act defines as places. And places are a site or a region, a building or other structure which may include equipment, furniture, fittings, and articles associated with or connected with the buildings. But I think what's most important is to look at the definitions from, apologies, I can just hear my, there's an echo in the background. If the mics could just be turned off, thank you. So if we look at the definitions from C, D, and E, it speaks to a group of buildings or other structures. And then it speaks to an open space, including a public square, street, or park, or it speaks to a place which includes its immediate surroundings in terms of management. Now, at these two definitions, one being site, the other being place. In the Act, it does define them according to these prescripts, but in practical terms, what we are talking about, I would say, are spaces that are completely different in their nature. And the best way to sort of highlight this is to look at the difference between Robben Island, which is a cultural landscape and fits into the definition of a place, I would say. And then we have the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Cape Town, which is a national heritage site, and I would say fits neatly into the definition of a site. Now, this is important because the way you would manage Robben Island as a landscape or as a place is very different to how you'd manage the Evangelical Lutheran Church as a site. Now, my previous colleagues highlighted the permitting process, and Nkuli mentioned Section 38 and how it relates to these sites, as they are called right now, in how we've declared them. But there are many more layers that you find in a landscape that you don't necessarily find at a site. And I just want to explore that a bit more as we continue here today. So in the absence of any definition in the Act, I've just taken the liberty to make my own definition, which is that a place or a cultural landscape can be defined as a geographical area of heritage significance which has been modified by human activities and is valued by a community possessing either tangible or intangible features. And again, this is not from the Act, this is my loose definition. Again, this is not an area Sarah has explored, but I am just trying to attempt to begin to operationalize this section of the Act. Now, Table Mountain is an example of one of these places, or let's say cultural landscapes. So Table Mountain is actually a grade 1 resource. For people that may not know this, Table Mountain is a grade 1 resource. It is a World Heritage Site, but not based on its, let me say, cultural heritage at this point. It's a World Heritage Site based on its environmental features. That is what UNESCO ultimately declared. SARA graded Table Mountain as grade 1, but I would imagine that in declaring Table Mountain, you would not declare such a landscape and hope to manage it in the same way that you would manage a structure such as the Lutheran Church. Another such example is Sophia Town in Johannesburg, which was nominated to SARA. And I may or may not be correct, but I don't think it's been given a grading. It has been nominated to SARA. It is, for me, undoubtedly a grade 1 resource. But again, when it comes to the actual declaration of such a space, which is an urban landscape, would one want to manage the space as you would a structure, such as the Lutheran Church? Again, I would say that you would find the same complexities in such a layered landscape as you would at Table Mountain or even at Robben Island as well. One of the most famous ones that we know is the Boerkaap in Cape Town. The Boerkaap as well, in its entirety, the entire neighborhood of the Boerkaap was given a grade 1 status. So the entire neighborhood is a grade 1 resource. However, again, you're dealing with an urban landscape that has multiple features and multiple layers. And so you cannot manage it as if it's a single structure. You would need something else, I would say, an additional level of management to such a space, which again encompasses the local authority, the provincial authority, and of course, SARA. Now the Boerkaap, I wrote the National Heritage Site, which is not entirely accurate. We identified resources, 19 resources in 2019, and declared those under a serial declaration. This has assisted us in terms of identification, but it doesn't solve the problem of management of this precinct in its entirety. Another site to look at would be District 6, again, which I'm not going to speak too much about because my colleagues are presenting on this afterwards. But this is another site where it is an entire neighborhood with many different structures, multiple landowners, local authority is involved, provincial authority, as well as SARA. This, I would argue, would also not be, it would not be possible to manage District 6 as a site in the sense of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. And then we have Langa Township in Cape Town as well, which I won't speak about as well. My colleague is presenting on this. Also a grade 1 site. So let me just say what that means. The entire Langa neighborhood has been given a grade 1 status, which means that the entire Langa neighborhood, if we were to proceed, would be a national heritage site. Again, that would not be a desirable way to manage this space, which has both historical and modern buildings. But most importantly, there are many layers to the site, including the streetscapes, the open space, open fields. So would you want to manage this as a site, as if it's a single building or a single urban? I would argue that that would not be a desirable outcome as well. So what does the Act say? If we look at the very first paragraph in the National Heritage Resources Act, the first line says to introduce an integrated and interactive system for the management of national heritage resources. So to promote good government at all levels and to empower civil society. But let's go back to that, to introduce an integrated and interactive system for the management of national heritage resources. But I want to draw your attention to the very last paragraph in this section, which says to provide for the protection and management of conservation-worthy places and areas by local authorities and to provide for matters connected therewith. So it's quite important to note that the NARA in its first paragraph states that we need to provide for the protection and management of conservation-worthy places and areas by local authorities. So yes, we have declared sites, but I would argue that since we have enacted this NARA, the National Heritage Resources Act, we have never provided for the protection and management of places and areas. And that's simply because we have not engaged with the piece of legislation within the NARA that allows us to do so. And that brings us to section 28. Now, again, we have not, there are no policies relating to section 28. There are no regulations relating to section 28. But given the sites that I showed you earlier, Sophia Town, District 6, Langa, Boakap, even Table Mountain, which are massive landscapes and you cannot really manage as a site, I would argue that this might be the key piece of legislation that allows us to manage these places and areas as the Act states in its very first paragraph. So what does section 28 allow us to do as SARA? It says SARA may, with the consent of the owner of an area, by notice in the Gazette, designate as a protected area, all right? I'm not gonna read all of this. I think, again, if you want to read further, section 28 of the Act is where you should go. But I want to go to section 5 at the bottom, which states, a heritage resource authority may make regulations providing for specific protections for any protected area which it has designated, including the prohibition or control of specified activities by any person in the designated area. This, I think, is a very, very powerful piece of legislation or a very powerful section in the Act which has never been utilized. Essentially, what this means is that Boakap, which is a unique space within Cape Town, in South Africa, a unique space in the world, which cannot be managed as a site, as I pointed out, such as the Lutheran Church, or even the Castle of Good Hope, which is also a National Heritage Site. The Boakap would likely either need its own set of bylaws or regulations as a protected area, which will then allow us to address or to maybe grapple with all those multiple layers that are found within the space. And again, we've never really interacted with this piece of legislation. We've never designated a protected area, but I would argue that in looking at those sites that I mentioned earlier, this just might be the tool that we need. Now, this is a protected area designation for Robben Island under NEMA, all right? So I only use this because, of course, in the absence of SARA in SARA not having any regulations of its own for any of these spaces, NEMA, which again is a closely related act, is one way we can find these regulations that have been enacted, but obviously for environmental reasons. Now, this is the NEMA regulation for the management of Robben Island's marine protected area. But what you see, again, I hope that it's visible, and I will share the gazette with anyone who's interested in this. But what you see in this gazette, again, this is not its entirety. I was just trying to compress a full, I was trying to compress a gazette into one slide. But if you look at the middle slide, at the middle document at number 6, that's where you see the restriction of activities as spoken about in our own act. You also see the control of activities as spoken about in our own act. And this regulation for Robben Island is quite detailed in what it allows people to do in terms of fishing, diving, etc. A unique set of rules and legislation for a unique set of circumstances that relate to a World Heritage Site. Now, this is where I would argue SARA needs to get with its urban landscapes. And for District 6, for Boakap, for Langa, Sophiatown, we might want to maybe explore this option as opposed to designating them as a site. I mean, for example, if you look at what section 2718 says, is that no one may alter a national heritage site without a permit from the relevant authority. So does this mean that if someone wants to cut grass at Table Mountain, which is ultimately altering the space, they need a permit from SARA for that? That is highly undesirable. I would argue that regulations which permit and manage certain activities in a massive landscape, such as Table Mountain, would probably be a more desirable outcome. Now, I want to speak briefly about the City of Cape Town's HPOZ. But before I do that, I want to point you all to Section 6 of Section 28, subsection 6, which again, I think has a very, very powerful piece, which says that a local authority may, with the agreement of the Heritage Resource Authority, which designated a protected area, make provision in its own town planning scheme or in its bylaws for the management of such an area. Now, why is this important? Some of you may be aware that the City of Cape Town undertook very positively to develop HPOZs, Heritage Protection Overlay Zones, for Boakap, for Langa, for District 6, for the very sites that I'm talking about. And I would imagine that it was an attempt as well to grapple with the complexities of trying to manage a significant area, place, not just a site, a significant landscape. And while there was a lot of ambiguity with these HPOZs, I would say that it was simply because the national authority and the provincial authority did not designate these spaces as protected areas first. Yes, the Act does allow for a local authority to enact an HPOZ, but even then there's more ambiguity because a local authority needs to be given delegated authority from the provincial authority. So we've got a very challenging situation, which can again be unlocked if a heritage authority, either SARA or a PRA, designates a protected area, we can then enter into an agreement with the local authority, such as the City of Cape Town. And instead of looking at it as an HPOZ, we can say, okay, this is a protected area, and you can make those provisions in your town planning scheme, whichever way you see fit. And if you look at the image on the right, I want to point your attention to that because, again, it shows you the exemptions that it was trying to achieve for the residents of Bo-Kaap. You declare the entire neighborhood, and therefore you would not want people to constantly need permits and to be paying money for permit fees in order to do minor maintenance in their homes, internal alterations, and landscaping. And of course, this does not apply to every site in the Bo-Kaap. This would be for the, I would say, grade 3 sites. However, if SARA was to declare the Bo-Kaap under Section 27, then these exemptions would not apply. You would have to come to SARA for each and every bit of work you do in the Bo-Kaap, including street maintenance. So I'm just going to show the slide, the diagram that Palmyra built for us. I really appreciate this, Palmyra. Just to show that we are thinking about this protected areas. We've never done it before. It's a new step for us, but I think it is something we really have to look at, especially if we're going to be grappling with Table Mountain, District 6, Langa, Sophiatown, and other landscapes in South Africa that do not fit neatly into that definition of a site. Thank you very much.
I'd like to remind everyone that at the times that we find ourselves in, the reason for this webinar and seminar was to also reach out to our greater community, both who are interested in heritage as well as stakeholders, in basically moving forward, both in looking at where the deficits are and also giving a barometer check of where we are, since we have been, curtailed by the pandemic. However, the main thing is to make sure and understand that ours is the main mandate in terms of heritage resource management at national level, and therefore we need as much engagement, representation, and also endorsement on the part of public in order to be able to further this aim, which is to protect and conserve national heritage sites. On that note, I'd like to welcome again Professor Kumar from CPUT, who is one of those collaborators who assist SARA in both the research component, which the capacity within our unit we do not have, because they have an expertise knowledge of where and what is happening in terms of industry as well as research. On this note, I'd like to say thank you very much for making the time, and we are very happy to see that you are healthy and happy, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you. Top right.
Thank you very much. Month webinar. I really thankful to you all for all your support. And let me share my screen, and I want to just show what we are doing right now with all your support and what our students are progressing towards protecting our heritage structures, right? Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes, it's visible, sir.
Is it fine now? So
yes,
my presentation is on like two issues. Like what we are doing right now is characterizing heritage mortar for a heritage site, which is Castle of Good Hope and Robben Island, and even our students are working on Dal Josephat in Paarl. That is also one of the National Heritage Site. So we came up with the preparing a material card for each of these heritage in order to whenever they start the restoration and other work, they can refer that card of those materials and try to prepare a compatible material in which one of our doctoral student, Miss Loke, is working on. And she's the one who initiated the work while I started in 2018 with the one coffee shop meeting. I still remember. So the outline of my presentation, I'm not going to take more time, and I will stick to the point. I'm going to introduce about what we are doing about the heritage site, and I will also introduce about what material property is needed in order to protect these structures. Then further, what we did to develop this PMC card, although we prepare a sheet, but I need to define something which can be more catchy in order to all the heritage side. And also we would like to propose some more concept on developing various single card for of structural health as well. And then I will conclude this session, right? So let me, I think, off my video in order to just have a streamlined thing. So what are heritage structure? As we all know that structure that are internationally, I don't know, yeah, that are internationally and nationally important and represent the unique past of a country, whether it is aesthetic culture, whether it is natural heritage, historic religion, military history, political history, or any special events. And why this characterization of material is needed? The need is to this can be in order to protect our culture or history for a future generation, while if we repair them and if we restore these structure with the authentic material, its life will be more longer what we are currently doing with that, right? So by analyzing of original cementing material can help us to achieve compatible and long-term restoration for the heritage building. And this is our current research, which one of my doctoral student is working, and she's working on development of heritage mortar so that a similar replica can be prepared for a different era structure. So currently we are focusing on Castle of Good Hope and Robben Island. So before we go further, let me tell you what problems are associated once we have some degradation in the structure. So if you see this particular arrow in this, we have various process of degradation like rheological, freezing, thawing action, erosion, crystallization, leaching, overloading, etc. And if you see how these mechanisms affect the structural thing, right? If we talk about rheological process, it will affected by structural geometry. It also affect the material at macro and micro structures. It also affects its mechanical parameter of the material, and it also do discontinuity of the material. You can say additional influence is of water and gas resistance will decrease or increase based on this location, and it doesn't affect any of its chemical constitution. Similarly, if you see other properties, if we talk about aggressive environmental impact, they generally affect its chemical constituent, right? And they additionally influence the macro and micro structure of the material, and even the mechanical properties, as well as the water and gas resistance of that particular thing. So this work nicely done by Ola et al. In 2015, and they have shown this thing for you can say on a concrete structure, but yes, we can also go for our heritage structures, right? So what this primary material card PMC will answer to us, like if we make such card for an structure, we know that what cementing material, that is type of binder, aggregates and additive were used originally when the construction of this heritage building was done. Maybe we did some repair work in between, and we know that what material we have used during that interim repair work as well. So different section of the building can be classified, and for those particular section of the building, we can develop a PMC for that particular site. So PMC will assist with the design of replica material. So those who whosoever is going to come for the restoration work, etc., you can supply this PMC card and show them that this is the original material which has been intact to the heritage structure. And yes, they can closely try to replicate that material in order to have a better compatibility with them. So we are currently working on that compatibility issue, and we are trying to develop such material for at least these two sites. And even Huekova et al. In 2013 mentioned that it's not about the only historical building we can prepare such thing, characterization, but even we can do this for the modern material. So after 10 or 20 years, if we have such a thing with us, definitely while we are doing the restoration work, those characterization will help us. So if we develop a PMC card for each individual structure and along all the cross section or different section, definitely that is going to help us in order to restore that particular structure. Further, I'm just showing my student work where we chose Castle of Good Hope, as well as we also worked on Robben Island, and where we have seen that we repair those things with the modern materials, and I think the inner like old materials are not very well compatible with that. So we need to understand that there should be compatibility between material once we use to them for the repair and restoration work. So development of PMC, like primary material card, if we say for the heritage structure, we need aesthetic properties. That aesthetic property is nothing but we need to do the analysis for the color and texture of the original material to avoid mismatch and to preserve the aesthetic representation by specific color or texture on the historical building. So that is quite important while we are developing a primary material card. So that is nothing but you characterize them nicely and then you include that in one single sheet, right? Then further physical properties, you also see whether the porosity, how the gradation of the materials are there, then density, frost resistance, water resistance, these are all comes under the physical properties. But from the primary point of view, we can stick only towards the gradation curve, how the different particles are used in that material or binders, etc. Further, if we talk about mineralogical property, that will tell us about the degree of hydration and present the quantities of minerals. So why this mineralogical properties is required? Because it plays a very important role the way a mortar behaves and reacts with the surrounding environment. So your mineralogical properties define how your material or mortar is behaving towards the outer environment or the surrounding environments in which the material has been used. So this is quite important for developing this PMC card. And if we talk about further, we also have to know about the chemical composition in order to know what various chemical compositions are there, like the type of binder we use and how much the quantity of that binder is there and what is the binder to aggregate ratio. We can identify those things in this chemical properties. So once we add all these properties together, we can develop this primary material card. And this is what we have with us. So this card we have developed. I'm just showing a sample for one site. So this is from Castle of Good Hope, which was constructed in 1666, and this is a picture of the material which is there. And if you see this is a gradation curve which shows how each of particles are there. The percentage passing is shown there, right? And the binder, if we say about the chemical composition, say the slightly hydraulic lime is there. And if we talk about aggregate, it is white quartz sand. Additives, if we talk about, there is a seashells present in that. And if we talk about binder to aggregate ratio, it is 0.25. Further, if we talk about the mineralogical compositions, there is carbonated material high in sulfate and chlorides with trace of nitrate, which is observed in that. And color, if we talk about aesthetic thing, it is whitish gray mortar with fine black gray seashell. So this will help definitely while we try to restore that particular site or particular section. So if we provide this particular card to the person who is handling the restoration work, they may closely work with this particular card. So further, the note can be issued like uniformly graded material, which shows from this curve with very low clay content and no organic content. So yes, this work was a part of our master work, and this particular card will help us in restoration work of the structure. And this work was done by Miss Loke during her master's, and she is now progressing towards her doctoral, and she already finished her proposal for the development of such mortar in order to restore them with the authentic material. Further, I would also like to add one more thing in this. Although work is in progress, I would also like to tell you about the development on primary structural health card. So this is what I proposed for the site which we are working on, Dal Yosefat at Pearl. So in this, we will considering mechanical properties. And what we say about mechanical property is about compressive strength. We will also look for Young's modulus, which is nothing but stressed over strain, and we will see how the behavior of the particular wall or cross section of that structure is there. Then we also going to find it out Poisson's ratio, which is nothing but if you apply a load, how things in a lateral direction towards the long, it's a ratio between the lateral to the lateral strain towards the longitudinal strain. So basically it tells you about how the deformation and other activities is going to happen in your structure. So this is what we got some sample. We did some test in order to know the surface level compressive strength because these samples were live because the structure was not in that good shape. Some of the big bricks were spelled out from the structure. This is what we do the Ndt testing. We are using a UPV test by which we send sound waves inside the structures, and we we record, like if you see, there is one receiver and one transducer which induces the wave, and then other one takes the wave. So we calculate, we carry out the time. This is all calculated by this UPV testing machine. And in this, you do not do any harm to that structure. So this is the site which is from 1826, and we try to develop, you can say, throughout this section, we already did the test throughout this section without harming this structure. And if you see the name is written there, like the year of this structure is, it is 1826. And this is Mr. Ryan, who is working on this. So he already completed all these tests with I think one intern was also there with whom he worked on this site. Somewhere the plaster also came out. So we did a quite extensive test on this wall. We are just processing the analysis results, and then definitely we come up with the health of this particular wall, that how much strength and Young's modulus on this portion, then this portion. So entire section will be classified with the help of this particular card. So we will make a nice diagram, and we will show that each cross section, what in what state they are, and how we can further retrofit it. Like we need to do certain analysis that cost, like computational cost is quite high in order to model it. And then we show that which part is vulnerable and where we need to do what sort of retrofitting. So this is the work which we are currently in progress. So I conclude my session with that. We need to develop you can say material card for almost all the sites, heritage and national importance site in South Africa, so that we can use them for the restoration work. Further, we can also propose a structural health card while evaluating all its mechanical properties. And even I can suggest we can develop a site health card as well as different card for various heritage site in South Africa. So by this, I would like to end my session. I just need a short thing in this. So thank you very much. I hope you understood and know what we are doing at CPUT currently. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Basically, as you can see, the length and breadth of the occupations in terms of the unit's work runs from purely technical to social, and it runs the full gamut. And for that, we are very, very grateful, and especially indebted to collaborators and institutions such as Dr. Kumar's engagement. This has given our unit both an idea of what is happening within industry, as well as how we can engage further in hoping to make both the level of management a bit higher, and also upskilling both ourselves as well as our stakeholders and the public at large. For this, we're very grateful. My next colleagues who joined us just before lockdown, so they've had to adjust to very difficult working circumstances, but however, they've taken like ducks to water, and we're very proud of the progress that they've done. And as this very small unit, which is thinly spread around the country, we implore both a robust engagement and also a level of training where people engage with the subject matter readily, and also in a matter that is professional. And to that end, we're very proud of the work they're about to present to you, and they're the new members of our unit. And at this time, I'd like you to welcome Mr. Keenan Africa, who will be presenting on one of the sites. And it'll be, thank you.
Good morning, audible.
If you have your video available to us. Thank you.
Just one more check. Can you hear me, guys? Hello? Audible, just to check. I'm not hearing anything.
Colleagues, at this time, while my colleague is getting ready, I'd like to remind everyone we are going to have a Q&A question session whereby we will collect the questions from your chat. If you could sign in on the chat and you type in, it's on the top right, right next to where your camera is. There is a bubble and you can use that to write your questions and or put up your hand. Thank you very much. Presentation. Keenan? Hello? Okay, on that note, we'd like to skip through, we're having technical issues unfortunately, but in order for the program not to lag, we will move over to Simtandile Tito, who's with us here. Simtandile is also one of our colleagues who's joined us here and has taken on part in our unit. She'll be presenting a site to us right now. So we're just going to switch over to Simtandile and then we'll move back to Keenan. Thank you very much.
Tell me when it's showing the Is it showing? Is it showing?
Just minimize. And then you
Good day, everyone. I'm Ms. Ndt Tito. I'll be presenting on the future areas of interest for the Built Environment Unit. So I'll be taking you through the township of Langa. This is the context page where I'll be taking you through the background of Langa Township, the overview of cultural heritage resource of Langa Township. The areas of high heritage significance in Langa Township, areas of moderate heritage significance of Langa Township, the areas of less sensitive heritage significance of Langa, the purpose of the areas and the involvement of these areas in the community. Then I will show you the pictures of the sites of Langa Township. The background of Langa. Langa is a township in Cape Town, South Africa. Its name in Xhosa means sun. The township was initially built in the phases before being formally opened in 1927. It was developed as a result of South Africa 1923 Urban Areas Act, more commonly known as the Pass Law, which was designed to force Africans to move from their homes into segregated location. Similar to Nyanga, Langa is one of the many areas in South Africa that were designed for Black Africans before the Apartheid era. It is the oldest of such suburbs in Cape Town and was the location of much resistance to Apartheid. Langa. Can anyone please switch off their audio? Thank you. Please switch off your audios and camera. Thank you. Langa is also where several people were killed on the 21st March 1960, the same day as the Sharpeville massacre during the Anti-Pass campaign. On 21st March 2010, now 50 years later, a monument was unveiled by the government in remembrance of the people who lost their lives while on the protest. These are the sites that I'm going to take you through. The sites are the areas of high heritage significance. There's Main Barracks, there's Kitchen Complex, there's Washington Drive, then there's the Old Post Office, the site of Old Dipping, and the Old Police Station. The background of the Main Barracks is situated at the center of Main Barracks Complex. This building was originally built as the kitchen and the dining hall for the demurratiers in this complex. A beer hall was later added, but residents continued to eat their meals there. The building, as touched in the 1980s, politically violent as the beer hall was seen as a distraction. Langa residents should be focused on politics, not wasting their time drinking beer. The significance of the site. It's important in the community or pattern of South Africans' history as the physical representation of a strategy of segregation and dehumanization which characterized the apartheid period. It's also important in the demonstration a high degree of creative or technical achievement at a particular period as a unique building design and unusual response to the housing needs and accommodation. Its strong association with the Langa community and the role that Langa played in the history of South Africa as the first formally designed Black township and the resistance of the residents and dehumanization inflicted on them by an oppressive government. Then I'm going to take you through the significance of the Old Post Office. Firstly, a little bit of background. The Old Post Office was used for the administration duties and the court proceedings for the passbook for residents of Langa, Nyanga, and Gugulethu. Building constructed with a temporary manner with irregular timber, boarding to manage and co-administration of the passbook regulations. It is situated in the center of the civic core between the substation and the council and administration building, was given a landmark site. The main space within the building was a courtroom where the accused was tried and sentenced for the lack of having a passbook or the correct papers with his or her passbook. The significance of this site, it's associated with the migrant pass and the procession of new migrant workers from the arrival and the railway station. The pass office is a site of memory for older people who experience the harassment and humiliation of having to apply for passes every year. It is used to be marked with the migrant workers and other residents who were trying to fix their passes up. Was a human hellhole because on a daily basis you saw human misery there. It's important in the community or pattern of South Africa's history as the physical representation of a strategy of segregation and dehumanization which characterized the apartheid period. The blue gum trees in the particular form part of the intangible heritage, and many people remember and associate the smell of the blue gum with waiting for the Dompas books. Its strong associations with the Langa community and the role that Langa played in the history of South Africa is the first formally designed black township and the resistance of the residents to the dehumanization inflicted on them by the oppressive government. The Washington Drive. The Washington Drive, originally named the Main Street, is the main street in the Langa. It runs in the east-west orientation and contains Bunga Avenue to Vanguard Drive. Many official, civic, and commercial buildings are positioned on the road. The significance of the Washington Drive. The heritage significance of the Washington Drive was the main route used for marches during the anti-pass demonstration. Washington Drive is named in the honor of the Booker T. Washington, an ex-enslaved American activist who was a prominent and separate but equally developed during the early 20th century. Robert Sobukwe Memorial outside the Old Flats on the Washington Drive marks the starting point of the Pass March. A small memorial is erected on Mendy Square to commemorate those who died when the SS Mendy sunk off the coast of the Isle of the Wight on the way to the France during the First World War. The square is also associated with the 1976 demonstrations and Mosaic Staley, and the intersection with the Lerotoli Avenue commemorates. Then let me take you to the, passing through. The next one, the special coaches. Here we have areas of moderate heritage significance. Special coaches, North Barracks and Old Flats. The special coaches, single-story residential buildings and ablution blocks for migrant laborers. Comprised 128 single rooms, 8 blocks and 16 rooms, and 36 double rooms, 6 blocks of 6 rooms. In total, accommodation was provided for 200 men and 100 women. Section for women was named the Spinsters Quarters. Ablution blocks were used by the broader community and the male initiates. There was a various section of residents known as the married quarters in Langa, which were developed in section from 1927 to 1938. Generally, the married quarters were 2-room dwelling with or without the verandas that were part of the core components of Langa. Houses are single-storied and terraces in a Victorian era style. Each house had an outside toilet and the back garden and communal taps. Served numerous houses, married quarters, housed residents who were given permission to stay in Langa on a permanent basis. The heritage significance of special coaches. The heritage significance of special coaches represent the early 20th century attempt to address escalating population dissonances of housing needs. It is important in the community or pattern of South Africa's history as a physical representation of a strategy of segregation which characterized the apartheid period. Its strong association with Langa community and a role that Langa played in the history of South Africa. Many women defied the restriction and illegally came to live in special quarters with their husband. Then the North Barracks. The North Barracks were built along the same style as the main barracks at the start of Langa end. Bunk beds accommodated 840 single men and were communal eating areas. The significance of this area, the heritage significance of North Barracks represent the early 20th century attempt to address escalating population needs for housing. It's also important for the characterized and the apartheid era period. The old flats were developed on the W2 between 1944 to 8 for male migrant workers and comprised eight four-stories building named A to G, and the 4-storied buildings were built of brick walls, asbestos, roofing, ceiling, wood block flooring, and cement floor passages. The significance of the old flats represent the mid-20th century attempt to address escalating population needs of housing. A number of well-known political activists were accommodated in the old flats, e.g. Tata Nelson Mandela. It is important in the community or pattern of South Africans' history as the physical representation of the strategy, segregation, and dehumanization which characterized the apartheid period. The old flats were the meeting point of the anti-pass marches, and the Robert Sobukwe Memorial is located immediately to the east of this complex on the Washington Drive. Areas of less sensitive heritage significance is the new flats and the zones. The new flats, pre to the 1970s, the site was occupied and the structures known as the reception depot. The significance of this area, it is important to the community or pattern of South Africans' history as a physical representation of strategy of segregation, which characterized the apartheid period. The heritage significance of new flats is largely contextual, and they represent the late 20th century attempt to address escalating population densities and housing needs. Then there's the zones. Greater Langa, comprising the old flats, and 27 zones was developed between 1944 and 1957 for migrant workers, required for an upsurge of labor requirement in the city after the W2. The zones are situated between Jungle Walk and the old flats on the land previously occupied by pine forest. Zones consist of a variety of formal structures and predominantly designed in an angular position to the grid street layout. Buildings were constructed from face brick exterior walls, painted interior walls, asbestos, roof sheeting, steel framed windows, and concrete floors. Each hostel has 6 rooms, sleeping 3 beds each for 18 male residents, with a kitchen and bathrooms. The residents arrange themselves in the building according to the clans, mostly without official permissions. Each building within the zones has been converted into 2 family units. Ownership of the zones remains with the council. High degree of informal settlement occurs within the zones. It's important in the community or pattern of South African history as a physical representation of the strategy of the segregation, which characterize the apartheid period. The heritage significance of the zones is largely contextual, and they represent the late 20th century attempt to address escalating population densities of the housing. As the landscape features after the reading of the zone's architecture from the street perspective has been obscured by the informal housing, and this is greatly distracts the heritage value. The purpose of these sites. The site of Old Dipping, although the structure no longer exists, it exists together with a number of other sites of the dipping huts, form a significant signage as part of the Langa Heritage Tourism Route and represent an intangible heritage. The old post office, this building still functions as the police station for the Langa community, working together with the patrol of Langa for the safety measures of the community of Langa. The Washington Drive was the main route used for the marches during the anti-pass demonstration, still taking initiative for the community even today, as it is a meeting point for the Langa Community Patrol and meetings for the whole community. Sorry. Thank you. The beer hall is the central focus within the main barracks complex. Space in the source luxury, the redevelopment of the beer hall could provide a valuable resource to the community as a community center with sport facilities, library, or meeting halls. Old Pass office is now used as a museum of Langa, also associated with the migrant pass. The special quarters, the building generally are in poor condition, and the facilities provided for the number of people residing there are greatly insufficient. Disney infill of shacks largely distract from the historic structure and they obscure the original layout. The new flats attempt to address escalating population, disnettes, and the housing need is there. The zones owned or managed by the city of Cape Town. These structures are much better serviced, but are still in a poor condition, and redevelopment would be desirable, was to attempt to address escalating population, disnettes, and the housing needs. The North Barracks, the redevelopment of this site is inevitable and not entirely undesirable. The building is in a poor condition, and the facilities provided, the number of people residing there, are greatly insufficient. Development pressure for creation of inadequate housing is a constant. The old flats, the redevelopment of the site is inevitable and not entirely undesirable. The building is in a poor condition, and the facilities provided for the number of people residing there are greatly insufficient. These are the sites that you will get in Langa. That is Guga's Tebe on your left, top left. Then the top right, it's Old Pass office. Then you're gonna get the new flats down there, the one written Langa. Then you'll get the King Langa Libalele, that's the Washington Drive. Then you'll get the specials on the side. If you can see that brown hall there, it's the beer hall. Then you're gonna get the monument on the right-hand side, top right. When you're taking, Langa has two driveways. You get two entrances in Langa. The other one takes you to the rank, which is the monument, and the other one takes you to the Bunga Avenue. Then the top down on your left, you're gonna get the specials. These are the special quarters. Then you're gonna get the new flats. Here, the Nkandla, when you're taking the Bunga Avenue, those are the flats that you'll meet on your right-hand side, down there. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Simtalile. Thank you for that presentation. Our other site that we'll be looking at is from Keenan Africa. Keenan, we had issues with communication with him earlier, but he'll be joining us now. Keenan just finished his master's graduate in history at the University of UWC. His thesis focused on questions of belonging, identity, and its relation to the housing crisis in Cape Town. Keenan is a very engaged and affable individual, and I look forward to his presentation. And everyone, please welcome Keenan. Thank you.
Hi, Keenan, I think your mic is off. Hi, Keenan, there's no audio from your side.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thanks.
Sorry for the echo. Presentation focus on the significance of District 6, the area and community in relation to some of the categories of significance.
Yeah. Keenan, unfortunately, I think you've either got Teams on your phone, so you got to switch off your phone on Teams, and then just have only your computer. We're having feedback outside. Thank you.
Problem with that is, however, that
Perfect.
right now.
Yeah, this is
See
perfect.
that using my phone.
Problem. Thank you so much.
Okay, to start over, good morning, everybody. Apologies once again. My presentation will focus on the significance of District 6, the area and community in relation to some of the categories of significance. When looking at what constitutes significance, the categories that SARA focuses on are historical value, scientific value, social value, aesthetic value, and rarity. Significance is also attributed to resources that best narrate the history of South Africa, as well as convey and represent the collective and shared identity of South Africa. A quick reflection of the relationship between SARA and District 6 so far. District 6 has been created as a Grade 1 heritage resource and identified to possess national significance. It has, however, not been declared yet, and this could be due to an array of factors, one being the continuing case of restitution. Added to the consideration of the Section 28 proposal of District 6 being a protected area, there are possible sites for serial declaration in District 6. These are the 7 Steps and St. Mark's Anglican Church, which are pictured on the slide, as well as the Moravian Church, Holy Cross, Roman Catholic School and Church Precinct, New Apostolic Church, and forgive me if I mispronounce these mosques, Zinacht ul Islam Mosque, Al Azhar Mosque, Khalil ul Rahman Mosque, and the recognition of these sites for declaration was compiled by Vida Memoria Heritage Consultants. And from here on out, I will speak on District 6 with regards to some of the aforementioned categories of significance. Firstly, some background. District 6 was named as the 6th municipal district of the city of Cape Town in 1867. And prior to that, it was known as Kanaladorp. The district, which is thought to have its origins in the early 1840s, was made up of a diverse population that crisscrossed the barriers of race, class, and ethnicity. Research by heritage activist Patrick Mellett show that the history of District 6 stretches far back, stating that District 6 has its roots as part of the original Horan-Haikona trading settlement established by Auchumau, chief of the Horan-Haikona, next to the Kamisa River, the foundation upon which the city of Cape Town was formed. When looking at its location, the significance of District 6 is further enhanced. It was on the edge of this district that the Fort de Goedehoop later developed into what we now know as the Castle of Goedehoop, the seat of colonial government. District 6 too was one of the first settlements of freed urban slaves after emancipation. According to the website of the District 6 Museum, the cultural and social value of District 6 cannot be understated. District 6 has been celebrated in literature by writers such as Richard Reeve, Alex Laguma, and Bessie Head, further immortalized in the artworks of Gerard Sekoto, Tyrone Apollos, Kenny Baker, and Sandra McGregor, captured in the photography of Jackie Haynes, Wilfred Paulser, and George Hallett. It is known for having provided a creative home for musicians such as Abdullah Ibrahim, Mervyn Africa, Trevor Jones, and Robert Sitole. District 6 was also home to the Eon Group, the first grassroots amateur opera, ballet, and drama organization in South Africa. And on the slide, there are pictures of a painting by Gerard Sekoto, the Yellow Houses, District 6. And below that is a picture of the Eon Group ballerinas. South Africa in the 20th century has had its fair share of political heroes, intellectuals, and resistance movements that have made an impact. In an interview about District 6, Professor Crane Sedin highlights some of Cape Town's major political resistance organizations and how it can be traced back to District 6. Beginning with organizations such as the African People's Organization, formed in 1901 and led by legendary Cape Townians such as Abdullah Abdurrahman, who became the first Black person to be elected to the Cape Town City Council and served on it for close to 4 decades. The Industrial and Commercial Workers Union, founded in 1919 and led by Clemens Kadali, who was the first Black national trade union leader in South Africa, and then the Non-European Unity Movement, formed in 1943, led by extraordinary Cape Town intellectuals Gulam Gul, Isaac Tabata, Ben Keys, and Sissy Gul. And Sissy Gul being the first Black woman to gain a master's degree at the University of Cape Town. And pictured on the slide is above Isaac Tabata and below him Sissy Gul. From the names mentioned and the organizations mentioned, one is able to recognize the impact that District 6 has within the political and intellectual fields within South Africa. Although forced removals can fall under historical value, as it does speak to a shared history and pattern in South Africa South Africa's history, forced removals is a standout factor of significance and cannot be relegated to a point within history. The first forced removals associated with District 6 occurred in 1901 when there was a bubonic plague and Africans were blamed for it and relocated out of District 6 to a nearby community, Uitvlugt, which was later renamed Ndabeni. Under the Group Areas Act of Apartheid Government, District 6 was declared a white area on 11th February 1966. It is estimated that over 60,000 inhabitants of District 6 were forcibly removed and relocated to the Cape Flats as a means to disconnect them from the city. Whereas District 6 isn't as rare, as there are many areas of forced removals that took place not just in Cape Town, but in South Africa as a whole during apartheid. It is within this thought that District 6 provides an opportunity. To some extent, the exceptionalism of District 6 provides a spotlight on forced removals, and it should continue in this vein to further highlight cases of forced removals throughout South Africa that have not received perhaps the attention as that of District 6. Therefore, the rarity of District 6 is an opportunity to further expand on the history of forced removals in South Africa. What keeps District 6 alive and makes it more significant than just a site of forced removals are the people and the memories of District 6. In conclusion, I want to focus on the place and the people that resided there that made District 6. What is to be acknowledged is the importance of the relationship between people and place as symbolized by the community of District 6. Although Ben in his presentation spoke about place, I would like to quote Edward Ralph, a Canadian geographer, and use his description of place as a space filled with meaning. And when we think of a place identity, it is the reciprocal relationship between people and the environment. It is all the meanings and memories that are invested into a space that come to characterize it and add a sense of belonging, which then not only makes it a place, but a home as well. In present day, we find ourselves located in spaces that are still dominated and defined by a racial character due to the effects of group areas and forced removals. Our place identity then comes to be characterized by social difference and exclusivity. When reflecting on the memory and place identity of District 6, although at times romanticized, it was still defined by a vibrant, multicultural place in which people of all colors resided alongside in harmony. It's a future past that reminds us of the community that we as South Africans need to strive for and inhabit. District 6 is therefore a very significant place in its symbolic nature of a place that represents South Africa and the ambition that it holds as a nation. Before I close off, I would like to extend my congratulations to the director and everyone involved in the creation of the award-winning documentary, District 6 Rising from the Dust. Thank you.
Thank you, Keenan, for that wonderful presentation. And at this time, I'd like everyone to switch on their mics. If everyone participating in this webinar could switch on their mics, please. Thank you. I would like at this moment for you to give yourselves and everyone else who presented today, who I'm very proud of, to call my colleagues, a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You can switch your mics back off. Thank you. And at this time, what we have is a lot of people have fired a lot of questions. What we'll do is demarcate them per the various speakers. So we'll start with Palmyra De Almeida's question first. She'll read out the question that was posed by each person on the chat that's applicable to her talk. And then also Simtandile will also do the same. And then Keenan, and then respectively Ben and Dr. Kumar as well. And at this juncture, I would like Palmyra to read out her question and then go to some ways of answering it. And my colleagues can assist in any one of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobani. So there's a question from Kirk White, where he wishes to ask Okay, so the question reads, I wish to question Palmyra on the draft permit policy. How has she engaged with the public? And is there any feedback loop between SARA and us? So the current policy is in its final draft. It has been circulated about 3 or 4 times now. And the public that I mentioned is registered and relevant stakeholders that we sent the policy to. They wanted further engagement, and that's why the commenting period has been extended to the 10th of October. And to answer the question of Shannon in everything, if you're actually interested in the permitting policy, I'm going to put my email down in the chat box, and you can just email me and I'll send it to you. We are happy to engage with the public. We are happy to get recommendations, comments, as many as possible, because it helps us create and build a robust permitting policy that speaks to, you know, the heritage on the ground, rather than just any theoretical ideologies and understandings. So thank you very much. I don't know if that's useful.
Thank you, Palmyra, for that. Is your question answered, Mr. White? I hope that it is. And then I'm not sure if this is a comment and or a question. Muthomi says, waited with bated breath for the description of the old dipping hut and the degradation and dehumanizing implication. Basically, both District 6 and Langa and even Phoenix and Sophiatown are an ongoing investigation. So we will be basically researching both sites to find the layers of significance. This was just an introductory presentation on the occupations and the issues that we have come up or come across with. So they're still ongoing, but we'd rather be more open in what we're doing rather than suddenly surprising you with these cases and without having engagement. Thank you very much. The next question is Shannon Chadwick. No, it's Shannon Chadwick. Further to Kirk White's question to Palmyra, where could we obtain the policy? I think basically Palmyra has answered that. She will basically furnish everyone with her details, and people will be given that. And then Ben is also going to add in just now. Ben, please go.
Thank you, Tobani. I just wanted to respond to Shannon on second question for Simi, which zones of the Langa neighborhood that results in the different levels of significant sensitivity. Just to answer that question very quickly, I know we're out of time. Essentially, there are newer structures in Langa that were built, including today, there are still new structures that are built. I would not place them at the same level of significance as the beer hall, which was built during apartheid times. So essentially, we don't want to give everything a blanket grading and say everything is of national significance. We want to actually delineate and say you have grade 3s, you have grade 2s, and you have grade 1s. We are focusing on the grade 1s, but still acknowledging that they are grade 3s, but also there are sites that I would say have no significance and were built very recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And to answer Yazid's question, I attended the webinar this morning and didn't see the presentation. All presentations we will collate at the end of the week, and they will be posted online for people to consume as they wish. In order for that to happen, it will probably be under the SARA website, under the Built Environment Unit. Ben's also got a question, and Ben will also answer. Go, Ben.
Very much. Just to respond to Yazid as well. Yes, we were meant to look at the Koi and Sun sites. However, because we have not formally declared Rattle Hut, which is a site we are busy with, and also we were unable to get in contact with the site nominators, we did not want to present it prematurely. So we just presented the two sites, which is Langa and District 6, which we are 100% going to be pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that clarification. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, the next question, I feel, all questions have been actually attended to. And on that note, I'd like again to say thank you very much for taking the time to celebrate with us Heritage Month and also Heritage Week on behalf of SARA. And I'd also like Ben to take over as he has a question. Thank you.
There's one question we missed, which is from Lindsay Napier, and she asked, where do we find best practice in the Act? The answer to that is that the Act does not prescribe best practices. What we presented today was the most efficient procedures or let me say the most efficient ways in which we have found
certain applicants have engaged with our application process when it comes to permitting. So there is no best practice in the Act. However, if you look at section 2718, it basically highlights when you will trigger a request for a permit, and it prescribes what you need to do at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I feel apparently there's one more question. Oh, you're welcome, Lindsay. Okay, on that note, again, this concludes our webinar for the day from part of the Built Environment Unit. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and also I'd like to, on behalf of my colleagues and all the visitors, including Dr. Kumar, thank them on an incredible effort, and we look forward to engaging with you in person and also in forwarding our mandate, which is the protection, conservation of the built environment. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Good day, colleagues. We are here in this session and we have invited you as the partners in Heritage Resources Management. I am Mama Komureng Nkhasi Lisawana, an executive responsible for Heritage Resources Management at SARA. While this session was meant to introduce you to the policies that we approved in the past year, we hope it also provided you with the opportunity to engage with us. And we thank you for availing yourselves, for your participation. We valued it. Continue to engage with us throughout. We wish you all the best. Thank you so much.